everyone. And as all of you go on this endeavor to immigrate to a foreign land, I congratulate each and every one of you for taking on this new challenge in your life. I myself, as you can see on the screen, went to the US at 1.5 years old. The boy in the little yellow circle is me, yes. And the time date on the timestamp on the lower right-hand corner is 1978, so you can all calculate my age right now. As you can see, in the past, when I first went to the US, teachers had two favorite questions they always asked me. Number one, are you from North or South Korea? And number two, where is South Korea on the map? So as you can see, the teacher is looking on the map, and they would always pull down the map and ask, is it near Vietnam? South Vietnam, South Korea. They always thought it went in tandem. And on the right, you can see that for me growing up in the US, racism was very rampant. And this is actually a picture from 2016, so it is still very prevalent in present day. But as you can see, also in present day, we have BTS winning multiple global awards, K-food, K-drama, K-pop dominating the culture scene, with also the first NFL player to wear, the first Korean to wear an NFL uniform for the Atlanta Hawks. And also with the success of Ki Sang-chung, we can also see Korean society is also in mainstream American society through Hollywood. So all of you are very fortunate to really capitalize on this time, in this monumental time in Korean history where K-pop, K-food, and K-drama has really been the next wave of culture. Now that's probably the most entertaining portion of my talk, because now I'm going to go into Bidenomics and how Biden's policies will shape the future economic policy, the monetary and fiscal policy of the US, as well as the FOMC or the Fed, and the economic outlook. And before I go into my talk, I'd like to introduce myself. So I went to the US, as you all know, at 1.5. I graduated from Pennsylvania State University. Then I went to Chicago, where I started working for ABN AMRO and Bank of America and US Bank. Then in 2009, I was fortunate to come to work for KEB, which is now owned by Hana Bank. And then I moved on to Crédit Agricole, which is a French bank, a French investment bank in Korea. Finally, currently, I'm at the American Chamber of Commerce, where I'm developing the business for the American businesses and Korean businesses in America. So without further ado, I'd like to go on to Bidenomics. As you know, in Georgia, we had a monumental victory for the Democrats. Through Ossoff and Warnock's win, they were able to seize control of the Senate. And with the vice president deciding vote in the event of a tie, you can see that the Democrats will have a majority of the Senate, and they already had a majority of the House at 222 to 211. So Biden and his policies will have an easier time to be passed. So who are Biden's economic advisors that are going to be setting his policies and the direction of his the next 4 years for the US economy? So we have the Council of Economic Advisors, and this is going to be chaired by Cecilia Rouse. And Cecilia Rouse will be the first African-American woman to be the chairperson in the 74-year history of this organization. And supporting her will have Jared Bernstein and also Heather Bushey. And they're both very they're advocates for the worker and also to decrease the disparity in wealth, as well as to have more equitable distribution of wealth in society. Also rounding out his team will be the Office of Management and Budget, who we have Neera Tandon. Again, she will also be the first woman in South Asian American to hold this office. Janet Yellen, who all of you know, was the former chairperson of the Fed, and also a very big proponent for the stimulus plans for the US. Just recently, I believe several hours ago, she had said that the US should act big in the stimulus package. And also we have Brian Deese, who is the head of sustainable investments for the BlackRock Group. And he had a very pivotal role in the Paris Climate Agreement, who we all know that Trump changed for the US stance. So we believe that Brian Deese will have a very important role as the U.S. re-enters sustainable energy, as well as it changes its policy on that. So what is Biden's tax policy then? As the Democrats have now taken control of the Congress, the House, or the Senate and the House, as well as with a Democratic president in office, we believe that this will have very far-reaching implications for the tax policy in the U.S. So I've just outlined a couple that Biden is proposing right now. So first we have of course, the child independent tax credit will be increased to $3,000, or from $3,000 to $8,000, as well as $16K for multiple dependents. And he'll also have a max reimbursement from 35% to 50%. Very important is the 21 to 28% increase in the corporate tax. As well, he will also have a new 10% tax on offshore manufacturing that will have offshore manufacturing and offshore service sourced overseas and brought to the U.S. for consumption. So this is very important for people manufacturing, having service overseas and bringing those products to the U.S. And also he will have an advanceable 10% Made in America tax credit. So for those of you who are bringing your production onshore as you immigrate to the U.S., this will be very beneficial for you. Also, for those of you who have any rental income, or are interested in the real estate community, he's also creating a refundable renter's tax credit capped at $5 billion per year. And as well, he's also increasing the generosity of the low-income housing tax credit. So as you can see, this will reach the real estate market, corporate market. All these will have tax implications. And increase in tax, of course, will translate, as economists predict, in a decrease in GDP. We predict that Biden's policies will overall translate into a decrease in GDP of about 1.62% over time. So Biden also has a very strong stimulus plan that I'd like to go over. So one of the headlines that came out was Biden unveils this $1.9 trillion stimulus plan. And what this means for those of you who will have citizenship or permanent residency in the U.S., number one, you will be able to have access to the direct payment of a total relief of up to $2,000. So this is an increase of $1,400 from the $600 that was given previously. Also, for those of you who are looking to employ employees for your business, the minimum wage will increase possibly to $15 an hour. As well, we'll also see that education will get a boost as Biden tries to open the schools again more faster, as $170 billion will be allocated towards schools. And Biden is very COVID-friendly in terms of testing and treatment, as $50 billion will go towards COVID testing, and also $20 billion will go towards the vaccine. And also, finally, he'll be making the child tax credit. So those of you going to the U.S. with children, he'll be making a child tax credit fully refundable for the year and also increasing the limit of that credit. So what does this translate in terms of the economy? So this will usually go in the last portion of this talk in the economic outlook, but it's very applicable here because after Biden announced this $1.9 trillion plan, Goldman Sachs immediately revised their growth for 2021 from 6.4% to a 6.6% growth for the U.S. economy in 2021. So as you can see on this slide, you'll see that 6.6% will be very strong growth led by the vaccine in 2021. But we'll go over more of that later. As I first go over the Fed, or the FOMC, or the Fed Open Market Committee, which shapes the monetary policy in the U.S. So the minutes of the Fed Open Market Committee are released 3 weeks after the Fed meets. And this gives you insight on the monetary policy that will be coming up and really driving the economy. And this, I believe, in Korean will be the 재정 정책. And this in tandem with Biden's fiscal policy will really work as a right hand and left hand that will drive the U.S. economy. So from the December 15th and 16th meeting, from the meeting on the December 15th to the 16th, we saw that the economy is improving and economists forecast unemployment to to drop to 6.7%. Housing boom will also come as we see low interest rates, and we'll also see that businesses will restart to invest in the economy, and the vaccine is creating broad range optimism across the economy, and we expect overall, and this is a conservative view, with the US economy grow 4.2% per economist. This is in line with the World Bank, which I believe is around 4.5%, as well as with other economist institutions. But we see that financial institutions are a lot more aggressive, as we saw with the Goldman Sachs at 6.6%. The next meeting is on January 27th, and I believe that we'll get more insight as the repurchase and the outlook on rates through this. What we're also seeing right now is there is a neutral Fed funds rate, which is the rate, the interest rate when the economy is at full steam, when employment is strong, and when we're at a very strong growth level. And this has dropped from 2012 at around 4.5% to the recent meeting last August at Jackson Hole for the Fed, where they saw this get cut in half to around 2.5%, around the 2.5% level. And what this really means in terms of monetary policy is, as the neutral Fed funds rate is a reflection of the economic factors or the fundamental economic factors, not monetary policy, is that it's akin to the Fed pulling a knife out without a blade. And we saw a mistake like this happen in some other global major economies in the world. And I think the Fed or Chairman Powell is being very cautious to ensure that the US does not make the same mistake. Also, the Fed is very cautious in economic scarring, which means that this deep rout during the pandemic is causing businesses to have more of a propensity to save. And it's also causing unemployment, as we see this on this picture here of the 1930s, the Great Depression in the US, where we saw people stand in line that were unemployed for free coffee and soup, or these were soup kitchen lines. And this is really a reflection of a deep economic scarring where the economy can be conditioned over prolonged periods of unemployment and lack of investment from corporates. So what is the economic outlook in all of this? In 2021, we believe the economic recovery will be through the vaccine. And the first phase of the vaccine will be to be those most at risk, so frontline healthcare workers, the elderly. And then the second phase will be those at risk in terms of health conditions for obesity and diabetes. So we expect a majority of the economy to get the vaccine around the second to third quarter. And this is in line with the economy recovering in terms of GDP. And we'll see that the US and the Euro area, which were the hardest hit by the pandemic, will get the most benefit. And we also see that China will get the least benefit from this chart, from the vaccine and the recovery. So overall, we see the second and third quarter to get the strongest recovery, and we see it tapering off due to seasonality in the fourth quarter. But overall, Goldman Sachs and other investment banks have a very robust around 6.5% of growth for the US GDP in 2021. Finally, we have an investors poll of about 1,100 financial persons in the financial institutions for January 2021. And they say, when do you expect the vaccine or the majority of the population to get the vaccine? And they forecast the second quarter, which is in line with the strong recovery in the second and third quarter of the economy. Secondly, what is their view on risky assets? They think that right now they're slightly bullish, and even though we have hit new highs, they're still very slightly bullish on risky assets. And also in terms of risky assets, then what is the most crowded in the market? And most believe that long tech is the most crowded in the market, so we might see a slight correction in this. But as we saw tech outshine other sectors during this pandemic, we find that a lot of the financial specialists still see that this area might still have some growth left in it. And what is your favorite asset right now to go long, which is emerging equities right now, emerging market equities? And as we saw, Samsung Electronics to the price per earnings ratio is about half of what we see with Apple right now. So we always see a lagged effect in the emerging markets. So we expect this lagged effect to catch up. But as we see the interest rates increase on the long end of the curve due to inflationary risk. So as you can see, the next slide is appropriately the 10-year US Treasury. Most people expect it to rise from 1.1 to 1.2%, or a rise in the long end of the curve, whereas the short end is subdued due to monetary policy by the Fed. So we're going to see a steepening in the yield curve, and due to that, we might see some money trickle back into the developed markets. So overall, everyone expects the S&P to still outperform in terms of major equities. And all in all, just be very cautious in terms of this recovery. It'll be vaccine-led. And I thank you all for your time, and I hope that this was beneficial. And I hope that you found some insight in the economy. Thank you very much.